All right. Is that seamless? Does it look right?
Looks great. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, I was talking before you got on about introducing myself as a Venn diagram. I do that often because I do so many things. You might have heard that. I'm a psych professor, teach full time in a doctoral program. We have a research institute called the Strong Brain Institute. Thank you for the trauma informed yoga there, because we do teaching and training and research on adverse childhood experiences and trauma informed care and building resilience in folks is our focus. And then the nonprofit, which I have up here right central in front of you, is Uplift Appalachia, which came out of another organization, and we've been working to help to mobilize the faith community and equip people to do whatever their piece is. And we don't tell them what their piece is, but it's kind of like wherever you are as a church or as a faith-based nonprofit to do the next thing or find the niche or whatever. And so there's a lot of training that goes into that as well. And so that I've been a researcher this week because I've been grant writing, but I do talks like this fairly often. So I'm just going to dive into it. I really do want to know, be formulating your questions as I talk, because when I do this, when I talk about this, there are different pieces you'll be interested in, but I would love to, there's a lot in here, and I would love to share with you which part of it you need to know by the time I get through. And so I'll go through. I was telling Eric, I don't know how long this will take, and I can talk forever, but I'm not going to talk forever. I want to save time to have some discussion. So make sure this, okay. So I'm going to talk on human connection as a treatment for addiction. And what I want to do first is lay out some groundwork. So at Uplift Appalachia, we believe that humans are created by God for connection to Him and to other people. We have trainings that go into details of that. But today I'm really going to talk about how connection might be a treatment that I won't say that we've been missing, but we maybe have underemphasized for treating addiction. And I tell people I want to cure addiction, and then I want to reform the criminal justice system. Those are my goals. I'm only 61. There's plenty of time, right? So the objectives for today you have probably seen if you got the flyer or the emails, but I'll reiterate those in case you didn't, that people are created biologically, psychologically, and spiritually to be in connection with other people. Early adversity, including abuse and neglect, can lead to later addiction. And then human connection can lead to reduction in problematic substance use through not just spiritual healing, which I know you've talked about, not just psychological healing, but actually biologically. And that's sort of the case that I'm going to make today. So what I'm proposing is that people who misuse substances might be replacing human connection with that substance. And I'm going to talk about what I mean by that. And with or without the divine origin, I can make the case just biologically for that happening. I like the divine case in there too, but I can make the case biologically for promoting or even requiring human connection for us to function at our best. Neurobiologically, psychologically, spiritually, we're all created to be in a relationship with other people. And I'm going to use two different fields of neurobiology, and don't let the neurobiology scare you. I'll explain it all. But I'm going to give you two different areas of evidence. And so the first is going to be brain development. And we're going to talk about brain development under stressful conditions and brain development under non-stressful conditions, with a particular emphasis on neglect versus like being nurtured. And that particularly plays into that adverse childhood experiences and early adversity and so forth. It doesn't have to be early, but the effects are more extreme early on. And then I'm going to talk about, and don't let this daunt you, the endogenous opioid system. And so the development of the endogenous opioid system, which I will explain in a minute. And I want to talk about that because it's so neatly overlays are what we know about addiction, and I'm going to say is responsible in the development and continuation and hopefully cure of addiction. So I'm going to start talking about brain structure particularly. And so when I'm talking about early brain development, I'm talking about the actual how our brains are physiologically built. And we know that however our brains are built is going to affect our later behavior and our later reactions and so forth. And I'll elaborate on that in just a minute too. And then when I talk about the endogenous opioid system, and I know this is like maybe an overwhelming picture. I was looking for something. You look up pictures of this, and it's like there's not a simple picture of how your neurobiological systems work. But so all through our bodies, we have nerve cells. So think of this as a pretty picture of a nerve cell. And then the close-up part is how one nerve cell talks to the next nerve cell. So and there's a little gap in there, and there are receptors. And so there are substances that fill our receptors, and there are all kinds of receptors, and there are all kinds of substances floating around, and they each have matching parts. And so in this picture, let's just pretend for the sake of argument that the little green balls are opioids, and that the little purple tubes there on the left are opioid receptors. And so I'm going to talk about the receptors and the opioids. And what happens is that wherever our opioid receptors are, they're waiting for opioids. They're built that way from birth. We have those. And so what happens though is our bodies also make opioids. And so the natural system is our body is making the opioids and they fill our opioid receptors. So keep that in mind as I go on. But when you hear opioids, most often you're thinking of substances that might be used illegally, heroin, or non-prescribed use of Oxycontin or fentanyl. I'm sure you hear lots and lots about fentanyl. We certainly do here. And these obviously are currently responsible for vast numbers of overdose deaths and lots of upheaved lives and so forth. But if you think down to the chemical level, they're very similar substances that we're talking about, same receptors that are being activated in our bodies. But I want to talk a little bit about the ones our bodies produce anyway. And so this much calmer picture here. And so natural ones are much more innocent. So when a mother and an infant bond, or when you fall in love, or when you laugh with your friends, if the system is working as it should, our bodies are releasing these opioids that are filling those same receptors, and it makes us feel good. It makes us feel calm. It can even reduce pain, just like, taking an Oxycontin tablet could. And so that's the endogenous opioid system. So with that, the knowledge of that, so brain development and the endogenous opioid system, I want to talk about how connection or lack of connection and so forth could be playing into addiction. And so let me talk about the brain development, go back to the brain development piece for a moment. And so when our brains are developing, normally, think of it this way: a newborn arrives in a family under normal circumstances. Within the family members, the parents, the mom, the dad, even the siblings will nurture and protect that infant. And as safe, caring adults, even older children interact with a child, brain connections are made. So that brain's being built around whatever's going on in that family, or in the life of that child, whoever it is that they're around. And so one of the things we talk about is serve and return interaction. And I don't know how much that's very commonly used language across Tennessee. I'm not sure if it got out of Tennessee. But serve and return is that back and forth with someone, typically a child. And so like playing peekaboo, one person does something, the other person does something, or asking a question and having it answered, playing catch with someone. Those are all serve and return kinds of activities, holding an infant and swaying to soothe them, things like that. And so this predictable back and forth interaction builds trust in the kid around how the world works. And so it's like, cause and effect. It's like, if I cry, I'm going to get fed or changed. That helps the child to feel secure, like psychologically, but it also is building the upper parts of their brain to understand this. And so this, in a nurtured brain, what we see is the cortex, or that upper part of the wrinkly part of the brain, is developed, and lots of connections are made, and that's where planning and learning and behavior control are most reside. And so the more we can build that, the better for just, life in general. And then the other thing we know, though, is when there's abuse or neglect, the child is not, not having their needs met, or maybe they're actually being physically harmed or emotionally harmed or whatever, that, or even just when responses are unpredictable, then that can inhibit the development of that thinking, planning, behavior control part of the brain, and focuses more on, because the child is sort of in survival mode, the part that is involved in survival is going to be developed more. And so the lower part of our brain is involved in like automatic responses to fear, the fight, flight, freeze. You can remember fight, flight, freeze from high school biology. That is another part of our brain. And so it's kicking you into gear. Your heart rate goes up and your respirations get shallow, and you can't think, you're just reacting. And so that's a normal activity, normal reaction. And we need that. If a bear runs in the room, you want to get out of the room because there's a bear there. But if there's not a bear, we don't want to be living like that. And so what happens is, if this is just ongoing stress, particularly early in childhood, but even later, your brain begins to accommodate to that and be formed around that. And so that's going to make that survival part overdeveloped and the thinking part underdeveloped. And so you might have deficits in problem solving or behavior control or anger control or something like that. And what happens as we get older is we may default to that part of our brain. And so someone who has had enough stressful experiences or been neglected enough to have their brain architecture altered, they're going to tend more likely to respond out of that survival focused part of their brain, especially when they face a stressor. If things are going well, maybe not, but as soon as there's a stressor, you may see this, overreaction or total withdrawal, or they may use substances to quiet those thoughts, or to escape. And so you can kind of see how this early adversity could predict later substance use, just psychologically. But then again, let's talk a bit about that endogenous opioid system again. So as I said, endogenous opioids are released during pleasant interactions with other people, normal human relationships, normally developing endogenous opioid system. They're activated as we interact with others. If a child, though, is neglected or abused, they're not producing those opioids in response to another person because they're not having those joyful interactions. And so the receptors are not being filled by those naturally occurring opioids. So it's like they're hungry, hungry receptors looking for some kind of opioid to fill. And so somebody that has had that kind of upbringing, then say they are exposed to some sort of opioid, or even other drugs can activate that. It's not just a meth can activate your opioid receptor. But say they experience a drug that fills that or activates that opioid receptor, all of a sudden they feel this feeling that they've been starved for. And I've often heard somebody say, somebody that's addicted to some sort of substance, say that the first time I used it, first time I used X, I felt like it was mother's love. I wanted to feel that way forever. Well, and if you can imagine, you have not felt this way, and now just using this gives you that feeling, even if it's short term, you're feeling this feeling that you're built to feel. And there it is, And so physiologically, it really is making you feel, quote, mother love. The other thing, though, that complicates this is if you're using an external substance, we call it exogenous. We got endogenous opioids, we got exogenous opioids. So an external substance that is doing that. What it does is our body shuts down creating those endogenous ones. And so we're no longer going to produce those because it's coming from outside. And I mean, our bodies like to stay in balance. And so it doesn't want to get too much. So it's like, oh, it's coming from out there. I don't need to make any more, And so our endogenous system, even if it was working, will slow or shut down. And so if they stop using the external one, then those receptors are empty again, hungry again, feeling unloved, whether you could be in a happy family, but feeling unloved because my receptors are now empty. I don't create those endogenous opioids. So it leaves the person really beholden to that external substance to feel good, or after some time, generally, it's really just to keep from feeling bad. It's like the feel good goes away after a while. We get tolerant, and the feeling good or feeling high or whatever tends to pretty quickly subside, and then it's just staving off withdrawal and the depression that goes with that, and the just feeling awful. So just to maintain, you're continuing to have to use that external substance. And so it's an example where we're actually replacing normal human connection, response to normal human connection, with a substance. Not necessarily intentionally, but it's replacement, And so you see why it makes biological sense why childhood neglect and abuse would predict later substance misuse. You may have, you also think of somebody, though, that they're just trying to, I've always heard that, oh, it's just they're trying to quiet those memories or get those memories out of it. Well, yeah, that may be true too. And those go hand in hand. It's like bad things happened, it makes me forget. Bad things happened, it changed my brain structure. And this is addressing the brain structure different, or the endogenous opioid system. So they go hand in hand. But you may also be thinking about, what about situations where it's not because of neglect, it's not because of adversity early on or whatever. Maybe somebody just recreationally used drugs, or maybe somebody had a surgery and ended up addicted because of pain medications following a surgery. The origin of the use was different, but once somebody's body is dependent on it, the physiology is the same. And so regardless of why, whether it was for fun or whether it was for surgery or whether it was because of adversity that you begin taking that substance, it's still gonna down regulate or slow down or shut down that endogenous production of opioids, and you're gonna be reliant on the external ones. And so even if you might be in a loving family that cares for you. I have a friend that she actually is the vice president of Uplift Appalachia. And I have to say Appalachia, sorry, I saw somebody on here from Sullivan County, and we all cringe when people don't say Appalachia. So around here, it's like door latch, Appalachia. So there you go. I was taught that when I moved here. I'm from Alabama, but that's where I was taught early on. But she, the vice president, was, family, middle class, kids in high school, sports, whatever. But she had surgery, and great support system, had surgery, and ended up dependent on opioids after the surgery. Had no idea what was going on, and eventually figured out, oh, this is what's going on. I am addicted to my medications, and which is what motivated her to come and join us and work with us on this. But even though she had that very strong support system, loving family, caring community, church body, all of that, when she wasn't using the substance, she felt miserable and unloved and depressed, and because there was nothing to fill that yet. Those receptors were empty. And so kind of laid out the how someone might become addicted to substances, and substituting the substances for the feelings that would be produced by interaction with someone else. But I want to talk a minute about addiction treatment. And I don't want to go controversial here at all. But I want to, one of the things that we do at Uplift is try to work with folks to problem solve what type of treatment is best. And right now, the main, well, let me see if I want to describe this yet. Okay, so I want to talk about the potential for replacement of one thing with another again. And I know there's a lot of, it's like, oh, you're just trading one drug for another. Well, I'll talk about that, but not to cast it off like that. There are benefits, and I'm going to talk in a minute about medication-assisted treatment. Well, I could just go on and put this up here, because that is the mainline treatment. And I think many of you probably do work in the medication-assisted treatment field. And there are a lot of lives saved through medication-assisted treatment. There are medications that can reduce the risk of overdose and death from opioids and even other substances, but the main ones are for opioids. But I want to talk about this in light of what I've talked about with the opioid system. And so I'll mention the medication-assisted treatment, MAT. It's often called now a medication for opioid use disorder, MOUD. Those are talking mainly about these three medications. The most common ones are, the most common medications used are methadone, which you have to go, typically you have to go daily to have a dose of methadone. Sometimes you'll get what are called take home, so you might have a week at a time, something like that. But you're very closely tied to the treatment clinic. Then there's buprenorphine, which you've probably heard of, Suboxone or Subutex, and that often you get a prescription for a month at a time, and you take that on your own, and then naltrexone. And so I'll describe each of those briefly. For most of you probably know what they are, but for the few that don't, I'm going to go ahead and describe them. So with methadone, in your body, it works like it completely activates your opioid receptor. So it works the same way as heroin or fentanyl or Oxycontin biologically, except that it lasts longer. So it's a longer acting, and you get it in a controlled environment, and so it's safer to use than using heroin, fentanyl, or Oxycontin for sure. And it is used, but it's much harder to access. We do have a methadone clinic here, but it only for the last few years. And the more remote a place is, the less likely methadone is going to be available. Where buprenorphine is fairly widely available, it's extremely widely available here, but that's a different thing. So we can talk about that later. But it is different in the way it acts. It only partially activates those receptors, and so it's like say if you were taking methadone, you could get higher than if you were taking buprenorphine. But buprenorphine partially activates, though. But the main reason for using it is it staves off that craving for other medication. It can you can't start, well, it depends on which one you're taking, but I won't go into the details. You don't have to have the details. But anyway, it partially activates those. But both of those, both methadone and buprenorphine, you do experience withdrawal if you stop taking them. And so because it is activating those receptors, the receptors get empty, then you would experience withdrawal if you stop taking it. You could taper off, but if you stop taking it acutely, then you're going to feel the pain and the depression and all of those things that go with the other drugs. But then finally, there is naltrexone, and what it does is it just blocks the ability of anything to activate those opioid receptors. And so there's not an effect of it. So it's not gonna make you feel mother love. It's gonna make you not feel mother love. It's gonna keep those receptors from responding. And I say naltrexone, Vivitrol. You may have heard Vivitrol in case you were looking for something that you recognize. And so it does block those. And so I'm not going to go deeply into the pros and cons of treatment medications and things like that, but I want to talk about this in relation to treatment of symptoms versus maybe healing of addiction for real. And so what I found, because I've done research in this for several years, and recently there actually was one in the mid-teens, like 2015, 2016, but in the last couple of years, there have been several articles looking at treatment medications and how they work and what the kind of side effects are. And so what they are much safer to use, and they do help to stave off the cravings for other drugs, which is great. And it's a great way to start toward the healing, hopefully. But one of the things here, there's very much a push to stay on the long-term, like as maintenance medication. And some at high doses, some at low doses, whatever. But the thing that we've learned is that those medications, just like with heroin or fentanyl or whatever, prevent people from connecting to other people. And so like even the Vivitrol, because it's blocking that receptor, you're not able to physiologically have that sort of mother love bond kind of thing going on. And so so all of those medications are inhibiting the ability to, or even the desire to connect with other people. And here I am, I'm going to tell you, I think connecting with other people is the thing that fixes this. And so it's like the medication is working at odds with what I think might actually be the best treatment ultimately for addiction. So, and we don't want to impede it. And so what do we do? So what we've looked at, and what we're actually, what I wrote 2 grants on this week, what we're trying to do is see if there's a way to, I'm going to say, upregulate the endogenous opioid system. So basically restart that ability to produce your own opioids and have those fill your receptors rather than the substances from outside. And so I work with folks, actually, I'm a psychology department at a state university. And so I have colleagues who do rat research. They, they study, there's some that study drugs and so forth. And I said, yeah, we can watch that system shut down as we give them the outside substances, and then they don't produce their own. The problem is you can't do rat research with this because it requires altruism. And I don't know any altruistic rats. We don't have rat church, and we don't have people, we don't have rats going and just altruistically caring for other rats that don't want to be around them and things like that. So we have to do it with people. And so what we're looking into is to see if we can set up some way to intentionally increase connection with people, and see if that actually curtails their desire to use substances or their need to use substances and so forth. And so we've got things like AA and other support group meetings. We know those are effective, and we know that's a place where people are connecting to each other, and you've got moral support and so forth. And people might say, oh, well, it's just because you've got friends egging you on. Maybe so, but maybe there's something to that interaction there that you're actually feeling almost that feeling that you get from using the substance eventually, if that system is getting restarted. So what we're doing is we are using transportation as a way to create connections with people. And so we started that because we had a little church here that we planted in a really high need, low income, high need, high drug use, high homelessness area of our town. And one of the things, it was sort of serendipitous, because we realized after a while we were, part of the church was giving rides to the other part of the church, because if you've got people that are homeless or actively drug using or whatever, they tend not to have a driver's license or a car or money for gas or things like that. And so we had folks that would give them rides, and it was not a planned thing to begin with. It's just that we wanted them to get to church. And what we saw was the people that were getting the rides. Oh, here, I should put the more fun picture up. Getting the rides got better, and got sober and got jobs and got houses. And it's like, oh, well, darn, look at this. This is actually being a factor for them. But we didn't intend it to be that way. So we started looking at it to see if, and this was even before I had started looking into the endogenous opioid system and all of that. It was just serendipitously happening. And so we started looking at the why. And so the project that we're about to do is we're partnering with, it's called Baby Steps program here. And it's a clinic, it's a pediatric clinic for children who were drug exposed in utero. And we have lots and lots and lots of those here. Like they probably have 80 patients, but I would say in some counties nearby, 10% of our kids are drug exposed. And so there's a very large population, and a lot of the barriers to getting care are, just being able to get there. So we're partnering with a church that is going to do transportation for the people and be trained ahead of time to, kind of like the ins and outs of addiction and trauma-informed care, and but then also the benefits of trying to create a friendship with the people that they're transporting, hoping to bolster that connection. And one of the things we were asked by the clinic, actually, they're saying, can you help us? This was through Uplifted. Can you help us with this? Because we've got these moms particularly, but dads too, that they are in treatment, or some of them are on maintenance medication. Some of them are completely sober. Some of them are still using but want to do better. So it's kind of like wherever they are. But what they've done as they stop using their drugs of choice, they also lose access to their support group, their community group, whoever their social circle, their social network. And so to leave the substances, they have to leave the people that they know, and they just don't have anyone. And so they were requesting with us, is there any way you can help us get some, just a friend group, a social support or whatever? And it's like, oh, this is a match made in heaven. Yes, let's do this, but let's do it to intentionally try to, because we're partnering with a church that is right in the backyard of this clinic. And so if some interactions can be created and friendships can be made, then maybe the parents can become part of that church community, and that can become the social support network. And so we're hoping we're at the very beginning of it. I mean, we've done this serendipitously before. We're doing it as a research project now, so we can actually control things and randomly assign and figure out this part worked, this part didn't, that didn't really change anything, and so forth. We're not actually going to measure endogenous opioids because that's real expensive, and these are small grants, but we are going to look at like social connection, and then the amount of substances that they use and how many trips they took and things like that. We're also going to measure stigma toward, like, from the people who are trained as drivers. So stigma, to see if that changes, like before they do our trainings, and then after they do our trainings, and then after they've spent time getting to know the parents and driving the parents and becoming friends. We think that also is gonna reduce some of the stigma toward the people who use the substances. But also we're going to look at the self-stigma in the people that are taking their kids to the clinic, because there is a lot of that. But as they're accepted and brought into this new community, does that also help them to realize their own worth and to not stigmatize themselves so much? So anyway, so the bottom line is, I want to solve addiction. Treating it is fine in the meantime, but if we're really going to cure it, and this is a lot of and ifs, if it really is a connection with people problem all the way down to our biology, it seems like that is where we may be able to make a real difference and really, really begin to cure it. And even if this isn't right, making connections with people and being their friends is not going to hurt anybody. So I feel like it's a real win-win. It doesn't cost anything but your time. And I tell people all the time, because I've worked in this for about 10 years now, and it's like we go around the phrase, it's hard, but it's worth it, but it's hard, but it's worth it. And it just depends on what day it is and how the day was, as whether you end on it's hard or you end on it's worth it, but it still is. And so that's what I dabble in. That's what I talk a lot about. And I would love to unshare somewhere and answer some questions. I was telling Eric that I love to answer people's questions that they really have, because there's a lot in my head that I would love for y'all to have, but I want to give you the part that you need.
Awesome. We do have a couple of questions. Well, one comment, one question. Anna said, what is the initial base level physiological difference between people who due to surgery are prescribed opioids and do not become addicted, and those people who do become addicted due to surgery prescriptions?
Yeah, that is a hard thing. My guess would be there could be some of that predisposition from whatever background, whatever, but I don't know anybody that has really looked. It could be out there, because there's lots of literature out there I haven't read, but I don't know if anybody has scientifically looked to connect, say, adversity to eventual addiction, or not. What are the protective factors? I don't know. And like I say, this woman that I was talking about, very protective factors, but then also she did get physiologically dependent on it, but was able to, once she realized that's what it was, with support of her support group, get off of it, and has remained off of it, as opposed to some people that continue to struggle after that, and so she, I think it was much more the physiological piece than maybe the psychological piece that very much complicates it.
And I guess talking about inherited traits can be a whole another presentation.
Right. Right. And then you get into all of this epigenetics, and yeah, I'm not that smart yet. So
let's see, we had a comment. How can a client victim of physical, verbal, emotional, and sexual abuse and neglect keep away from falling into addiction while having negative thoughts and so much peer pressure around?
Well, so I'll tell you, this is, I wish I would love to give you the magic pill. Oh wait, no, that's what got us there in the first place. I really see the connection, support, human interaction piece being important there as well. Some of the things that we know early on is that a lot of those, even those early effects of stressors and abuse early, can be buffered if there are safe, stable people that they don't have to be your parent, but like a coach, a Sunday school teacher, whatever, can be buffered by having those connections. And I think that does both psychological and physiological prevention there. But the other thing is having people, when things are bad or when things have been bad, to feel the feels with you and let you survive it, if that makes sense. And so, I talk about even some of the folks that I have sort of mentored through recovery programs and things like that. It's like the immediate sort of thing is, I want it to stop. I don't want to think about it. But if you have somebody there with skin on with you as you talk through or feel the things, or maybe just little snippets of it, and you can have your support person there instead of your tranquilizer there, I guess is a better way to say it, and you survive it, then you can do it better, and gradually it has less and less control over you. But it really takes that having a trusted human that can do that with you. And I think that is best. And like, again, it could be a parent, it could be a friend, it could be whatever, but other people who can sort of share. I go biblical, share the burden while you're burdened. And it means both of you are probably feeling pretty yucky, but then you both get through and you both get stronger as that happens. Where I think so much in our society, it's like, well, let me just fix it and it'll all be peachy. Well, I think we got a bad rap. Things are not always going to be peachy. So we've got to learn to work through the ones that aren't. So that kind of get at it.
Yeah, that's good. And I have another good one. Lord said that I have a student or students probably who say they use recreationally. When does it become an addiction or a problem?
That is so hard. And I have raised 4 kids. The youngest is 21 now. So far they're all in good shape, but I have heard so many people. I was just having a conversation with somebody last night who has a brother. It's like, it's not a problem at this point. It might be one day, but it's not now. But at the point that you're trying to defend, it's not a problem. It probably is already a problem. It's, can you put it down and walk away for real? I mean, people say, oh, well, I could stop when I want to, but have you tried that? And I think a lot of it depends on why you're doing it too. Because there are a lot of people that can have a glass of wine or two and they're fine and they walk away and that's fine. And they might do that once a week, or they might do that, a couple times a week, but they don't have to the other days. And there are others that, you have a glass, which means a bottle, and then I've got to get another one for tomorrow. They're very different things, and I don't think that all substances are bad and all alcohol. I don't think so. I mean, gosh, Jesus drank wine and have a little wine for your stomach, Timothy, things like that. I don't see it as bad, but I think you have to kind of examine why you're using it and do you have to have it? I mean, I look at my coffee cup and I think, you try to wrench that coffee cup out of my hand in the morning, I will be the first to say, I am addicted to coffee in the morning. I can't, if I did not have it, I would have a headache. I would be a bear. And it's like, I am functional with it, right now, but I am also addicted to it, so it's kind of the why, and the can you not, and also looking at why do you feel you need to have it, and is there something else that needs to be dealt with? Mine is, I would rather have the coffee than waste all that extra couple hours sleeping because there's so much to be done. But somebody else might be trying to numb something that if they were to deal with the something might not need the thing. And so I think all of that needs to be explored.
Well, it sure would be easier in your research if you could figure out like a COVID test and we could just test the brain to see if there's an addiction to the brain. That sure would be a lot.
And if we had a restart button for your endogenous opioid system, it's like, okay, we're going to stop the fentanyl now. We're going to restart this. I'm going to smile at you and it's going to be there. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
And down the road, maybe, but nobody, I don't know anybody else there are a lot of people talking about this is maybe the way it works, but I don't know anybody else that's trying to actually experimentally restart it. So maybe they are. I hope so.
Well, it's such a tough disease because we don't think we have the disease and we deny having the disease up to the
right. Yeah.
Okay, here's an interesting one. We did have a few requests to maybe get a copy of your presentation out.
Can I just send it to you and then you can just distribute it? Okay.
Right. And I could post it
the pictures mean very little, but all my notes that I said are in there and those might be really helpful.
Okay.
Well, I wasn't looking right at the camera because I was cheating.
Yeah, they were pretty pictures too. Joe asked, is there an increase of survival rate of people whom stop opioids on their own?
I do not know the answer to that. I would bet because if you stop them, you're not using them and they're what kill you. So I'm going to say because of that, yes. But Yeah. And I, I keep saying opioids, but like where I am, and this may be where you are too, pure opioid use is almost non-existent. Now we have people that are dependent on buprenorphine as a treatment and may use beyond that, but meth is the thing here. It's just rampant. And I would rather somebody use heroin and taper off heroin and never touch meth than to touch meth, because we have treatment places here that are just like, we're at a loss and we have to kick people out because they're so like unruly and they don't comply. And it's like, you can't, there's no reason to be in a program if you can't be, if you're not doing the program. But it's like, what do you do there? And it's just like, it has this grip on people. But then a lot of times it's also adulterated with fentanyl, and then they die, but you can also die of you can meth overdose too. And it's like, people say, oh, you can't meth overdose on that, but you can't. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. It's just really ugly. And you're like, explode. You don't just go to sleep like you do with the others.
Well, and Clayton asked a good question, and I guess this kind of goes along with the medicated assisted therapies. Does this have a connection with or similar to the reward deficiency syndrome theory that addicts or alcoholics are using to repair a dopamine deficiency?
Yes, yeah, and I didn't go into the dopamine thing on purpose because it just gets so complicated. I'll throw in, I used to do cortisol research. And it's like, whenever you try to start looking at one biological system, all the others are running at the same time. And so, yeah, that they do relate. I don't study it as closely, so I don't even want to act like I know what I'm talking about, other than, yes, you've got, this chemical goes down and this one goes up and this one is replaced with this, and you do this. And so they're all interplaying. And I don't know that we will ever know how all that interplay happens. In fact, what I used to study, which played nicely into this, is I used to look at stress during pregnancy and whether that predisposed kids to an eventual ADHD. I know that doesn't sound real related, but it really is still that biological programming because of adversity happening early on. And so a lot of people were doing research to try to get down to where is the molecule happening, which I've kind of talked about today. And all I'll say is, I don't really know. It's like inside you, all these things are happening, but we know if we reduce stress during pregnancy, the kids do not have the same behavior problems. And we know if we have these blissful childhoods, addiction is less likely to happen. And we know if you get really connected to a social community, you are less likely to continue using substances. And so it's like, I'm using the biological argument, but I don't know how it works. And I'm probably going to end up just doing both ends. And if we find something that's curing folks, let's do that.
Well, back to human connection, Kathleen points out that certified peer support specialist programs are designed to fill the gap, provide that connection. And that is like a real big trend right now. And it's really great to see that grow.
It is a huge trend. One of the reasons that we're trying to mobilize churches is because, like, we have a lot of CPRSs in our area. We have our hospital system has been great about, they've gotten several grants. So they're just like training and training and training. But because our numbers of people who need those peers is so high that we can't pay enough humans to do it. Like, I can have a peer that helps me navigate my treatment or whatever for an hour a week. But think of all those other hours in the week, and it's just like the dosage is not quite high enough where if you have a community and you've got a person who is struggling with addiction and they've got 2 or 3 people who are their people, and so they can always have a person as opposed to waiting till next week when I see my peer, then I just think there needs to be more of it. And so there's like this informal that is a lot of it, and then the peers are great. And I mean, if we could train enough and pay enough, that'd be great. But it's just like we look at mental health professionals. we've got such a shortage. You know, people will say, I laughed sadly when, you know, when the first COVID grants came out, because it's like, look at all these people in such psychological distress. We're gonna give all these billions of dollars for grants for more mental health professionals. And I'm sitting here in a training program saying, they're not born yet. You know, we're going to have to raise the humans to then train for this, because they don't exist. There's not a way to fill that many slots. You know, they just aren't there yet, which is why I think training the lay community is so vital, even if it's just in the gap in between, you know. But if that can kind of become the culture of, oh, wow, whatever connection I am making with people, that's helpful and vital in the mix, you know.
Yeah, it is great to see a lot of the peer support organizations like ROSC in Texas, Recovery Oriented Systems of Care, and a lot of groups like the Recovery People joining forces to do legislation. And I think that's another big way that our states could help out with the mental health crisis, is to fund some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I'm not a politician, but if I was.
See, Tennessee is good about funding things. The thing is, the way we were talking about how the state is shaped. There's all this money. There's a lot of money, but it tends to like fall near Nashville, and we're like up in this. Most people don't know it, but they're actually is part of Tennessee beyond Knoxville. And we're in that little point that is just kind of like, oh yeah, East Tennessee, that's Knoxville, right? Yeah, and another hour and a half, 2 hours beyond, you know. So yeah, we're in.
Right. Well, I really appreciate your knowledge. I mean, we could probably go on and talk about this really deep, but a great presentation, good topic. I hope everybody got a lot out of it. I do work at Starlite Recovery Center, so if you have people that are struggling with drugs or alcohol, we do have a residential treatment program. I'll be glad to help you out, or your clients find the right fit for treatment. That's what I do, and I know a lot of my colleagues do that too. We're part of Acadia Healthcare, and we have treatment placement specialists that'll be glad to help find the right fit. So stay tuned for more webinars coming up in the future. You can check out our Facebook page and our website. We post that information all the time on great resources. And I really appreciate everybody joining today, and you have a great weekend. Thank you, Dr. Andi.
Thank you. And I will send this to you.
All righty. Also, one last word. For those that need CEU or CEU certificates, we're going to send out an email tomorrow with that link. You just simply log on, do your evaluation, and print off their certificate. I say simply very loosely because we know technology gets in the way. And if you do have an issue, just let us know and we'll email that to you. So thanks everybody for joining. Have a great weekend. God bless.
So I'm good to go.